I want to welcome everybody. I feel like we've got the beautiful structured Brady Bunch going here with Dr. MJ in the middle. So I just want to say I'm so grateful to all of you for so many things, but first and foremost, our connection. And I remember each and every one of your interviews. And this podcast has been a journey of love and gratitude. And I'm a bit amiss because I didn't anticipate the level of connection and friendship that I gained across the world, and just all the support that you've continued to give me in my own business and with my book. And I just want to say a heartfelt thank you, and I'm delighted to celebrate season 5 with all of you. So thank you so much. And I did some questions because I thought you guys wouldn't expect anything less from me. And Neil has really rubbed off on me in a very good way. I have to tell a quick story about Neil. So I was doing my audiobook. And one thing I love about Neil is he's very much like a dad to me, and I love him dearly. And I know when I ask a question, I'm going to get the dad goods, and I'm going to get it really quick. So I did a rehearsal in my audiobook, and Neil was so great. He said, "Deb, it's awful." He's like, "You're reading to me. I want to pretend I'm having a conversation with you. I want to hear the different tone and pitches and your personality." And that was it. I took the Neil advice, and I did my audiobook, and I thought of you every time I was reading. And it's all these little bits of advice that really make us better people, right? So I have a question, and I'm going to let whoever wants to join us to dive in. But I just quickly want everybody to say who they are and where they're from, just so, because not everybody knows everybody. So let's start in the top left with Joseph.
Okay, so my name is Joseph Stetter. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I am a corporate culturist and a resume whisperer. So I help individuals land their dream job in as little as 2 days. And I help companies hire the right fit people and keep them.
Lisa Hickey, you need to connect. That's my concierge. Michael, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Michael Netzley in Singapore, and founder of a company called Extend My Runway, IMD affiliated professor. And basically, I am working on the last mile problem in any corporate initiative, whether it's digital transformation or adapting to an aging workforce. But how do we actually change behaviors and get it done, which is behavioral science and neuroscience.
And Neil, the exciting thing about Michael is with his work is, we can hit the peak of our cognition in our life in our 60s and 70s. So I'm keeping Michael on speed dial for sure.
Michael, I'm going to connect with you because there's actually something happening in Japan that would be of great interest to you, possibly. And since you're already in Singapore, it's a short commute for you. There's kind of a Japanese AI / culture integration. So that might be, so I'll follow up with you on that afterwards.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Dr. Neil.
Hi, Neil Grunford. I'm a medical psychologist and neuroscientist in Bethesda, Maryland, outside Washington, D.C., USA, where I'm a professor at the Uniformed Services Medical School, where we train physicians, advanced practice nurses, psychologists, U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, and public health. I've done a lot of work on drug addiction, TBI, PTSD, but for the last 10 years have focused on leadership and particularly team development in healthcare. And it's really an honor to be here. And I'm writing notes on every person as you're giving us your brief bios. And please, if I can be of any help to anyone, I would really be honored. Thanks for including me, Deb.
Oh, my pleasure. Everyone on this call today is heart-centered, as you know. Dr. MJ.
Hi, I'm Mary Jo Burchard from Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I specialize in working with leaders and organizations that are in the middle of a messy something. So I focus on building trust. I've built an assessment for trust, trust change readiness, and I have a way to help people lead and manage personal and team organizational crisis and change, chaotic change in particular.
Sure.
And so it's about trust, readiness, and belonging are the big things that I focus on with leaders and followers.
And
so
MJ,
it's a great pleasure to be here.
MJ, I need to talk to you because I'm going to have a big conference in the fall of this year on trust, and I'm considering you for my panel. So we need to chat.
That'd be great. Love it.
Bradley.
Unmute. Hi, I'm Bradley Sherman, everyone. I'm a demographic strategist and futurist. I wrote a book called The Super Age, Decoding Our Demographic Destiny, which charts the next 10 to 20 years for the world in terms of our demographic transition as birth rates collapse and longevity increases. I'm also the co-founder of a new media company called New Rules Media. We're on Substack now at newrulesmedia.substack.com, and we're trying to help people make sense of all the change we're going through with data-driven insights and expert commentary.
And Bradley's book is amazing. Him and Michael are doing phenomenal work just with the whole spectrum of ageism. As we all know, it's having its own level of problems. And Bradley's a bit humble, but Substack recognized his work as one of the tops on Substack. So well done, my friend.
Deb, have you connected him with David Smith?
No.
Okay, because I just had a meeting with him yesterday, and
sure,
so that would be a great connection between the two of them.
I'll let you two connect. See, this is the Brady Bunch. I love it. Beautiful, Nicole. I think you're on mute, Nicole.
Yes, now it worked.
There you go. Nice to see you.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this wonderful celebration. So my name is Nicole. I'm based in Switzerland, in Zurich. And I'm an expert in authentic leadership and then working together authentically at the top level. So I mainly work with the CEOs, with executive team and boards to create leadership alliances, which I formulated as authentic, committed, and intentional relationships. And through that, we really influence the whole culture of the company. When it works at the top and when this alliance is intentional, committed, and authentic, magic happens. Yeah.
And Nicole connected with me in season 1 and was so gracious and sent me her beautiful book and was just supportive of the podcast and my book and has just been a real ally as a fellow executive coach. And she's a huge mentor for me. And I don't know if she realizes how much she is, but she is. And I'm just delighted for all the success that you've had.
Thank you so much.
Miss Lisa, it's so nice to see you.
Good day, everyone. Hi, I'm Lisa Hickey. I am based in Northern California, in Oakland. I'm actually internal. I'm a senior HR business partner at a nonprofit association, actually, that serves IT professionals by getting certified and trained and helps them with their career. So I'm all in on the trust and authenticity and leadership. It's so important.
And Lisa's humble too. She has a phenomenal HR background and is heart-centered, and that's sometimes hard to do within the talent management space. So Lisa, so happy to have you here. Monty.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. I'm from the tiny Midwestern hamlet of Galena, Illinois. And I have my own leadership training firm that focuses on strategy execution. I'm about ready to launch a new program here in June with one of my European colleagues, and it's going to. Organizations typically struggle with the whole idea of strategy and executing on that strategy. There's a pretty significant gap, and we're setting out to demystify that and give people a simple, straightforward way to understand it and communicate that throughout their organization. So I'm excited about announcing that and getting that going. But yeah, as far as Deb and everything that underpins my work is heart-centered, and I don't fall into these categories or profiles of different types of leadership. I think there's only one way to lead, and that's heart-centered, and that's just really important to me, and I think to everybody else. But it doesn't often get said. So anyway, congratulations on season 5, and we'll look forward to that, Deb.
Thanks, Monty. And David, you popped in. Thank you.
I got here, I rushed as fast as I possibly could. So
introduce yourself and tell us where you're from and what you do.
Well, I am David Breyer. I'm a native New Yorker, and now I live and work in the Midwest, and it's not part of a witness protection program. So just get that out of the way. And what I do is I build brands. But when I say that, to kind of eliminate the lane that I don't occupy, that doesn't mean that I work with these big sort of Goliath type organizations. I really work with small to medium sized businesses, and I work directly with the CEOs because there are incredible amounts of brilliance and genius that are really undiscovered. And part of the problem that I find is that when I start talking with them, there's this entire just ocean of brilliance and ingenuity, but yet they sound like everybody else. They don't know how to really find their place of what's that voice that allows them to talk in a way that they don't sound like, because people today, we're so quick to put someone or something or a business in a box. Oh, you're a blah, blah, blah. There it is. Oh, you're this, boom. And so, and that's really how Deb and I met. And that's really what I do, is I really help find that point of distinction, that point of differentiation, to really give brands a voice, not only in the way they walk or talk, but in the way that they present themselves to the world. So it's for products, for services, et cetera. That's essentially what I do. Other than that, I drink a lot of espresso.
Yeah, he's a coffee connoisseur. And again, David's a bit humble. I took his course during COVID, and it was eye-opening. It was scary. I read his book. We laughed because it cost more to mail the book than what the book cost. Anything to Canada. We're born free and taxed to death, right, Joseph? And David's tagline and website is "Rising Above the Noise," and he does that very, very well. So I am an alumni of his course, and I learned a lot. His book is like my playbook, and I constantly go back to it. And we're in a noisy world right now, which I don't really need to say to anybody. But so I'm going to throw out a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I am so proud of you. I'm so proud of you because we put over 100 entrepreneurs through the program of all sorts, from large corporations to solopreneurs, et cetera, all around the world. And I love when I see someone who's taken the material, because again, just the context, I've been doing this for 45 years. I've actually been doing this for 4.5 decades. And so I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. And I love when I see someone like Deb take what the tools, she was given gems, and she leveraged the living shit out of them so well, so brilliantly. And it really makes me proud. And it also is just great to see in action. So thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to let Neil know that when we when we launched the book, we did a soft launch in September, and then we did the book signing and really the big launch on November 1st. And I was speaking at a conference on November 9th. The Ontario Brain Injury Conference had resumed post-COVID. This was our first big conference, 650 delegates. And the day that I walked out of that conference, my book went #1 in healthcare administration. And for those of you that have read my book, I end each chapter with a full circle life moment. And that to me was such an intersection of my worlds. And then yesterday I spoke again at another brain injury conference. So that it's just, we talk about the seasons of our life and how they're intertwined and what we did in our previous worlds, et cetera, et cetera. It always shows up. It's like the medical case manager still shows up. So I just found that very serendipitous and very much, excuse me, still feel like I'm getting back to reuniting with people and getting to events. I volunteer at hospice, and we just had our first event post-COVID last night, and we had 400 people. And it was just like, okay, I feel like we're getting back. So here's my question. And anybody can answer this because I didn't want to pick on anybody. So can you share a favorite memory or moment that you remember from our podcast and something that you took and put forward either in your life or leadership? And Lisa, thank you for getting up early, by the way.
It works out. I'm also a native New Yorker, so I'm in Manhattan right now.
Okay, perfect. Anybody got any responses to that? Anything
I'm happy to
top
go.
of mind?
I'm happy to go, Deb. It's a while ago because I was season 1. But what I remember most was the connection with you. Your being, the essence of who you are, and connecting. Yeah, over that, I remember the flow and the ease of our conversation, which was supernatural and organic, as if we had known each other forever, and we didn't until the podcast, right?
Yeah.
So I found that very, very special. And yeah, I think I will stop there, because if I have to pick on what was huge, what was the most important thing, I think that's it.
And since our conversation and reading your book, just to see your journey and everything that you've done, it's so heart-centered, and just everything you've done, from taking your hiatus and going into the jungle, the rainforest, and how you brought all of that knowledge back into your coaching. It's beautiful. And I just don't think there's enough of us in the world that work with leaders, regardless of what we're doing. And we're all in the people business, right? I always say that on the show. MJ, I know you have an answer, so I am gonna call you out.
Yes, that's why
She always has the best lipstick on, so I'm always trying to keep up with MJ.
I have to say, Deb, that the thing that lingered the most when we talked, and I have to say, anytime that we talk, is your ability to not only be intentional with the questions that you ask, but intentional in listening with your whole self to the answer. Listening to, Anne McKnight once said, listen to the person behind the words. And that is what I feel like you do. And I think that is, especially when people are feeling vulnerable, and you mentioned the word noise, that word has come up. When there's so much noise, to find someone who's willing to shut out the noise, to be present in the moment, and in a single answer, to make sure that you're getting it right with the person that's in front of you. I think that you do that well, and it makes me kind of love you.
Thank you. When I became a yoga teacher at 50, and I'm turning 58 next week, by the way, I remember I had to apply to teach. And the yoga teacher said, why do you want to be a yoga teacher? And I said, I want to be an exemplary listener. I'm a good listener. Sometimes I'm a great listener, but I consistently want to be an exemplary listener. And I think when you have that whole mind, body, spirit connection, because yoga is science of the mind, it allows me to go there quite easily and just maintain that equanimity. And it's one of the things I pride myself on in teaching the C-suites that I work with. And, you know, they think it's woo-woo in the beginning until they see the benefits. Neil, jump in.
Yeah, I like to build on what both Nicole and MJ said. And it's not surprising that we're seeing similar things, but maybe slightly different lens. Two things struck me as I focused, unlike many of you who seem to have been focusing in this space for decades, I pivoted into it about 10 years ago. And but like David, that we share, I've been doing this 45 years, other things. But what I really emphasize, and which you embody and display and role model, is that communication is the how of leadership. And there are two things that I always focus on. One you've referred to as one of my mantras I'm constantly focusing on. One of my mantras is frank feedback is a gift, and to understand that. But the other point is communication is the how of leadership. Communication is sending and receiving verbally and non-verbally. But the most important characteristic of developing great leadership and followers, leaders and followers, is to listen. But how to listen is hidden in the word listen, because the word listen is a word anagram. And if you rearrange the letters, it spells two key words: silent and enlist. So to bring people together, bring them forward and to be open, having them have a sense of psychological safety and belongingness, and then to receive the information. And Deb, although I'm constantly professing this, encouraging it, you're such a great role model that, as you know, and I can't go into details, why I've recommended you to coach some people that I think highly of in very important NGOs, because I thought you would be, and you've been, absolutely perfect for the people that I've recommended you to and their organizations. So that's really the key for me.
Well, to build on what you just said, that particular person is going to be kicking off the beginning of season 5, because she's a completely different person today. And she always is grateful for you. And I want to put her NGO out to the world so we can get her more followers. This particular woman, I don't want to ruin this surprise, but she's running a top NGO for anti-trafficking in the world. And I'm continuing to work with her, by the way, Neil. She doesn't want to let go of me. There's no codependence. We're just building. We got new goals. But the work that she's done is so heart-centered. And she was in a country doing her master's and she witnessed it. And that was it. She came back to her city and raised $10 million or $20 million. And that was 10 years ago. And just a phenomenal.
The interesting thing, Deb, with people is MJ also I have working with another member of that same team, but fitting the right person, the custom tailored approach, which I think is really central to heart-centered leadership. And so I just want to, on this recording, thank both of you. I know from the people you've coached, because I hear from them frequently, you two have made a huge difference in their professional and personal lives, and has thereby enhanced their saving tens of thousands of young women from human trafficking. It's just remarkable.
It is. And it's one of my favorite heart-centered stories to talk about. And thank you for that. Bradley, I would love if you would shed some light on your heart-centeredness and your brilliance and what you're doing, not only with all of your data and where we're going, but just deflate the elephant a little bit in a heart-centered way with ageism and kind of what you're seeing. Because I know not everyone's had the privilege like me of reading your book, but give us a little overview of where you see the next 5-10 years, especially with, like you said, declining birth rates.
Yeah, I mean, top line is that we are in the midst of, without sounding hyperbolic, the single greatest demographic transition in the history of the world, where for the first time in most of our lifetime, we'll see national populations decrease. And for a good percentage of us on this call today, we'll actually see the world population stop growing. And this changes everything. It requires us to rethink growth and whether or not this idea of perpetual growth and perpetual economic prosperity is really possible in an era where we have fewer people. It also forces us, some people begrudgingly, some people welcome it, to think about our population differently, think about the productive opportunity that each and every member of society has. And this is where I think that we're starting to see some leaders move. Whether it's fully heart-centered or not is always that big question mark, because businesses are here for essentially one purpose, and that's to make product and service and sell it. And businesses are coming under extreme labor pressures right now. And some of them are leaning into this change by embracing older workers. Some of them are resisting this change by leveraging artificial intelligence and machines. But as I often say, AI is great, machines are fantastic, but they don't buy products and services and they don't pay taxes. So I think that we're starting to see a sea change in how society operates. I think we're reverting back to historic norms where people don't retire necessarily. They stay in work until they can't. And this will bring us back into a more, I think, heart-centered world, because we'll see that each and every person has value. Each and every person can contribute. And each and every person isn't measured by their age anymore. They're measured by what they can actually do. And that to me is really exciting, but it doesn't happen overnight. Mm-hmm. Culture change takes time within a business. It takes even longer across society. So I would say we're in the maybe first half of this major social change within our countries. We've got at least another 15 to 20 years left.
It's interesting. I was at the Berkshire Hathaway AGM in Omaha last weekend, and to see 93-year-old Warren Buffett talk the whole day. He had his right-hand man beside him, Greg Abel. And he's Canadian, by the way, and he's been with them for 20 years, and he's now the acting CEO. But when he opened, he said, "Charlie, I'll hand it over to you," because Charlie Munger just passed away at 99 in November. And it was there's 30,000 people there and 19,000 seats in this convention center. So we literally had to line up at 4:30 in the morning to get a seat. But where I want to go with this is he talked about heart-centered leadership, and my eyes just welled up. And he talked about how business acumen complicates things with language, and that we have forgotten two things: logic and common sense. And he said if we could just get back to those two fundamentals in business, it would be such a shift in the world, whether it's culture, anything in leadership. And then the fun part was he got asked about AI, and he said, "It scares me." And then he always uses a lot of candor and humor in his answers. And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what my introduction to AI was." He said, "Somebody sent me a video and it was myself and I sounded like myself." And he said, "I almost sent myself money." And he said, "It scares me." So he said AI started years ago when they created a missile to destroy the world. And he just said he couldn't go into it because he found it very upsetting. He almost got a bit emotional. But Michael, his cognitive agility at 93 was mind-boggling. And at the end of the day, he asked everyone to keep being heart-centered. And he said that if he didn't give away the billions that he has in philanthropy, he would be the richest man in the world. That's not his goal. His goal is to help as many people as possible. And Tim Cook was there. Bill Gates was there. He referred to them several times during the course of the day and the philanthropy and heart-centered leaders they are. And he also made a mood point of saying, we know everyone's replaceable. And he said, with respect, when we lost Steve Jobs And then Tim Cook had to step in, and Tim Cook has now taken Steve's vision to the stratosphere, which I thought was kind of framed in a nice heart-centered way. And then when Warren would forget a question, Greg was so heart-centered, and he just said, Warren, I just want to add to your answer. And he said, I just want to go back and mention the one piece. And he didn't say to him that you forgot. Like, he was just so attentive listening to what Warren was doing. He knew Warren was emotional, but Warren was also grieving in front of 19,000 people. And then he ended the day by asking everyone to stay heart-centered, which again, I'm in tears by this point. And 19,000 people in unison stood up and gave him a standing ovation and clapped. And he said, please come next year. And I really hope that I'm going to be here too. And it was just like, so I thought of you, Bradley and Michael, and the work you're doing, because I'm seeing globally with the 3 large corporations that I'm with, they're all embracing it, and they're changing, Lisa, they're onboarding in their HR strategies, and they're letting go of an undergrad or a postgraduate degree because they're getting the richness of experience, emotional intelligence, and 30, 40 plus years of rich experience that you're just not going to get that. So I can speak
to that, and I can speak to that because I'm actually building a platform that will level the playing field where it's not who's the most designated, because this will give a 360 view of both the technical skills that everybody possesses in 3 tiers, as well as all the character/soft skills in 3 tiers. And what I'm doing is I'm taking kind of 7 different assessments that each give particular data, where I can now give a complete picture and say, you know what, you have somebody in your mailroom that's, let's say, a new immigrant that actually has more knowledge and more leadership than all of, let's say, your engineers. And so rather than promote an engineer that's not ready to be promoted, you should promote the guy from the mailroom, and here's kind of the factors that you need to consider. Now, what's interesting is that I live this conversation all the time. I've been a generalist in recruiting for nearly 20 years. I've worked with companies like Deloitte & Touche, Apotex Pharmaceuticals, Tata Consulting Services. When my father passed away 12, 13 years ago, God rest his soul, he was the senior director of operations for a real estate developer where he was in charge of 16 buildings. And they decided, instead of bringing somebody with his level of knowledge and expertise, they're going to save some money and promote kind of somebody that he was mentoring as a project manager. Now, within about a month and a half of him being promoted, he went to the CEO and said, I have no idea how Adrian handled 16 buildings simultaneously and a shopping center and everything in between. I'm about to have a nervous breakdown. And they ended up hiring 6 or 7 people at $120,000 each that could handle 1 or 2 buildings at a time, rather than just hiring somebody for $200,000 that is, experienced and knowledgeable and with a proven track record. And I think that, there is now a much bigger understanding that the workforce is changing, where, newer, younger millennials kind of have a sense of entitlement and give it to me versus I earn it. And more experienced are coming in and saying, look, here's the foundation, and you're not doing the foundation. I referred to this in Deb's show, or also, like, I love watching the show Undercover Boss. I always laugh at the end of the show when the executive has the aha moment. I should really talk to the people that work here. I might get some insights. And it's like, you think? Kind of thing. So, and to what David was saying, I think that, there is a model right now where people are also stuck in, how do I, as I think David mentioned as well, even on the resume, how do I brand myself in a way that highlights how good I am, so that I'm having the right conversations rather than wasting my time with, for example, low-level recruiters that might not understand the level of value that I bring to the table. And so it's very interesting to me that right now, as I'm building this beast of kind of corporate culture integration, and I can kind of create a live dashboard that says, here's every employee, here's the leaders that are causing you the most turnover in the company. And whether it's the communication style or the lack of heart-centric approach, or it's this, I can actually give them live data as to where or why and how much it's costing the company, because turnover alone is in the United States and Canada is over $4.5 trillion in costs, kind of thing.
Crazy. You know, when I case managed corporate wellness, was me getting the phone call for a short-term disability claim saying, can you get John Doe, excuse me, back to work from his stress claim? Corporate wellness today in 2024 is now employee retention. And it's just mind-boggling to me. And Joseph is right. I mean, the amount of money that is spent onboarding, training, only to have such a huge turnover, it's becoming a massive problem. And it's kind of like this tsunami beast that we're trying to hold off. And like Bradley alluded to, like, we're not going to be able to hold it off.
Yeah, it actually gets worse before it gets better from a HR management perspective, because the labor markets will get tighter without extending the runway for older employees. So there seems to be this kind of massive shift happening within some companies where they're literally changing their entire model, which they leaned on from about 1946 on, which was fully centered around recruitment, to one that in the future needs to be centered around retention. And we're seeing this show up in a myriad of ways. But I think one of the best ways that you can see this is how benefits are being delivered and how work arrangements are being constructed. You know, just 5 years ago, I really couldn't find a single company in the United States. There was probably one here or there that had any type of menopause or perimenopausal benefit. And now they're becoming normalized. Yeah. 10 years ago, you couldn't find any companies that were really doing caregiving well. And that's become normalized. You're starting to see companies think about grandparent leave now. This is all this evolution to be more focused on retaining the worker, making sure that they feel valued in their companies. And then, of course, you see the growth. And I'm sure people have debated the value of these within enterprises, but the growth, and not in terms of the number of organizations that have them, but also their sheer power within organizations of employee resource groups. And these employee resource groups have evolved, I think, very quickly from my research, from ones that were just kind of light convenings about a decade ago to real advocacy groups for the employees now. And with some companies, we're seeing actually significant change happening because they're making hard requests of HR and leadership.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to ask Monty and David a question. What's one message or piece of wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners now that we're celebrating 5 years, which still, like, I got to pinch myself. I know it's only 60 months, but where did it go? Whatever's on the top of those brilliant mind of yours.
I'll let you go first, David.
You want me to go first?
Please.
Okay. Okay.
You're a tough act to follow, I can tell. So.
He is.
Okay. For your listeners, Deb, I would say, well, you know, the lane that I tend to go down is I almost inevitably look at what's the conversation that's not happening that should be happening. Mm-hmm. I always look at that. I'm like, what questions aren't we asking, or what isn't happening that should be happening? So I'm, which I find is as much as that's native to me, I find that it's very uncommon for people to look for what's not there. They're so busy talking about what's there and what's present. So the thing that I adore about you and what you do is that it's real and it's not lip service. Like I introduced you to Claude.
Yes.
Right? And Claude Silver is Gary Vaynerchuk's number 2. Claude was someone that I was very fortunate to connect with via LinkedIn. Absolutely love her to the ends of the earth. I mean, we're such we're like brother and sister. It's very real, very deep. And I love real and deep. And the thing is that I love everything you stand for, but what I think would be an amazing addition to the conversation is to really introduce, okay, yes, you talk about heart-centered leadership. At the same time, I know, you look around, there's a lot of people paying lip service to that, where it dilutes the actual authenticity and the legitimacy of it. And that happens in everything. There's, whether you want to talk about coffee and food, like there's all these people that can talk a great game with regard to whatever, but then you taste it and you go, this tastes like shit. It's like shit, it's ugh, right? So it's like, it sounded great until you actually really confirmed, was it real or wasn't it, right? So I would love to add to what you're talking about. What does that really mean? Or what aren't people talking about, to just widen the depth? Because you're willing to go deep, and I don't know if everybody knows you the way I know you. I mean, you can talk, you can make a sailor sound like a nun, which I love. I mean, you could be and I'm being, for those, I'm meeting everyone here for the first time, I can be a very, very foul-mouthed, I could talk street, not because I want to be offensive, but because sometimes I need to just drop an F-bomb to just kind of like give someone a slap for them to go, oh shit, oh my God, oh that's right, you're really talking to me. And so I'll go wherever I need to go to arrive, okay, to really make the impact. And not for me to make the impact, but for them to actually come to and arrive to the conversation we're really having. And so that's the thing that I would say. I covered a lot of ground.
And I like that. And that's why we finish the season at the end of this month. And then we go dark for June. And that's exactly what we do, is we strategize on how can we up level? What can we do different for season 5? Yeah. And it's almost like you said, it's the coaching conversations that I have that I need to integrate into my every time I'm doing a podcast interview, because I pride myself on, I'm not on anybody's top 10 podcast list, and I'm okay with that. I love a nice, decent level of obscurity. But when I interview someone, I do my research. I do my due diligence. I want to know where the connection and intersection is, and I want to value the time. And then the Fab 4, I'm going a little bit deeper this year, a little bit different, because I want to show who this person is outside of their extrinsic label or role or responsibility or brand. Like, just who is this person? And we've already done a couple, and it's been a lot of fun. And I never give the questions because I don't want that cookie cutter templated interview. I like when people go, oh my God, you want to know my imperfections? How much time do we have? Oh, Deb. And it's just so real, and we don't edit any of that out. And that's what I love about it. And I will continue, but that's a great, great suggestion. Monty, what do you think?
This sort of has run throughout this conversation. I've heard it several times, but I like to remind people that individual performance drives collective results, and that we need to focus on the individual. A lot of times we look at things at a high level. In my business, I like to tell people that organizations don't really execute, people execute. I mean, you can make the argument that you add up statistics in the aggregate and the company can claim that that's what they did. But realistically, it's the effort you put into each of the individuals and how they're able to collaborate and function cohesively that makes the organization or the activity, whatever it is you're doing, work. But I don't think we pay enough attention to the individual. And if we just stop to get to know people and to really find out what makes them tick and work with them in the way that they like to be, treated and worked with, that you're going to have happier, productive people, and that has a trickle down effect, right, in terms of how they go home and treat their families and what they do with their time. So yeah, focusing on the individual, I think it's heart-centered for sure.
I talk about it in my book. Life shows up at work and work shows up at life. And when I have C-suite leaders say to me, like, what's going on with her? What's going on with him? Nobody wakes up in a bad mood to go into work in a bad mood. And all of you have talked about this. It's listening to the emotion. What's behind those words? I think it's a gift. I think yoga and meditation elevated that skill for me. I was in a large company 2 weeks ago, and they were looking to bring in an executive coach. And the plant manager was very surprised at my answer. And I said, I think you should interview like 5 people, not just me. And he just looked at me and I said, this is a very personal relationship. Like, we're going to get to know each other really well. And I think you should interview 5 coaches. And this is what blew my mind. And David's going to love these stats. He called 5 executive coaches. Myself and 1 other returned his call. The other one, so three no callbacks, which blows my mind. I call back, the other person calls back. The other person wasn't willing to come and meet him at his plant. I went and met him. I gave him an hour of my time. I brought him my book. And I stood in that heart-centered confidence. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is my assessment. This is my program. And then he brings out this leadership book binder. And he said, our leadership team has had this gentleman come in for 3 years. And he used to work in the trades. And now he does leadership with the trades. And he said, we're not getting anywhere. And I said, well, what assessment are we doing? Well, we don't have one. So I could hear David going, Deb Crowe, I hope you see this as an opportunity. And I could hear Neil saying, stick to your heart-centeredness because you're going to have to do a lot of education and advocacy. So I find it ironic that I knew who I invited on this call was going to show up. There's a myth behind my madness that you are all here together because there's synergy here. There was a little concierge in my wish connecting you all. But there's so much intersection in who we are as heart-centered leaders. Our geographic region doesn't matter, where we live, our country, our sector. Amongst all of us on this call today, we're all doing phenomenal work. And I see potential in us continuing to chat and talk. And I'm just very humble of the kindness and grace and just gratitude that all of you have given to me for support of the show, for being on the show, for sharing with our listeners that we've now built to 65 countries. When I started with Nicole, we weren't even in any other country other than Canada. So to end year 4 and be in 65 countries, I'm just humbly proud of that. And our demographic for our listeners is early 20s to late 70s. So Bradley and Michael, we're there. And I get the nicest emails from people that say, thank you for asking that, or thank you for talking about that. And I think to David's point, you all know my definition of heart-centered leadership is honoring your connection with people. And I've had thousands of people say, what does that really mean? And if I said it in David's lingo, it's behavior brand. Just be a heart-centered person and do something for the good, as Nicole's doing with her brand.
I actually want to add to that and actually
Yes.
acknowledge it because he said, there's a lot of noise. And the fact that you said call other coaches, there's a lot of people that brand themselves as executive coaches, but either their ego gets in the way where they're too big or too busy for this, or it's, I've learned this and now I've kind of taken it and said, I do it. But they don't necessarily know how to do it. And I've had run-ins with this where coaches kind of say, I'm a one-stop shop for everything. Mm-hmm. And it really bothers me sometimes because I can say I've yo-yoed with my weight all my life. And I met a 22-year-old that told me that she has life experiences as a personal trainer. I said, okay, have you studied kinesiology? She's like, no. I'm like, have you any certifications as a personal trainer? She's like, no. I'm like, have you competed at a very high level as an athlete that, you did training. She's like, no. I'm like, then how did you get your expertise? She's like, YouTube. And I looked at her and I said, I'm 47 years old. I've torn both my shoulders twice. I just actually had surgery on my right shoulder. You're going to train me because you watched YouTube videos. You're half my age, you're female, you've never had any injuries, kind of thing. Right. Now, similarly with personal trainers, if I meet someone who's 250 pounds, my first question is, were you 500? Because if you were 500 and you're 250 and you're a personal trainer, I respect and admire what you went through to get to that stage. But if you're 250 and not jacked like this, but 250 because you like eating pizza and having cake, I don't kind of honor you're a personal trainer because you, like in Canada, you can spend 2-3 weeks on the CanFit program and call yourself a personal trainer. And so to me, that is a level where some of these coaches are like, well, I can coach you on anything. No, like, know where your limit is and own it. I as a resume whisperer and so forth, when I help individuals find a job, like if someone comes to me and says, hey, I'm bipolar, can you cure me? My answer is no, I'm not educated enough for that. I don't have enough experience. However, if you need me to help you put together a letter to your HR or to your boss that says, here's how an episode happens for you, and here's the behavior that you have so that you're less likely to get fired if something like that does happen, yes, I can definitely help you with that because I've been doing this for 20 years and I understand the verbiage. But there's a ownership of, here's where I might say this is beyond my skills or knowledge, where a lot of coaches today and a lot of marketers as well that are kind of new to the market is like, here, I'm going to show you how to make $100,000 a month. And all they did is copy and paste whatever program they did. And there's no original thought and and a lot of times, because I experienced this directly, I just went through $100,000 of marketing that got me no results, is because they give me you need to do 10 things, but they give me steps 7, 8, 9, let's say. And so I'm like, I didn't do steps 1 through 6. So no wonder I have such big gaps in results, kind of thing. And that conversation needs to change drastically, and it needs to change in the corporate world where we need to change the mentality of, well, this person has the most designations or this person is, there, because the level of experience and the ability to problem solve, the ability to be creative is such a massive gap. And I see it from, like, education. We're not teaching kids to think for themselves. We're teaching them to memorize. And especially with AI tools right now, some of them are passing high school, passing university, and they haven't had an original thought, kind of thing. So.
Yeah, Deb, this is really interesting. And I was thinking about particularly something Monty said and Bradley said. And so I really appreciate learning today. Like Monty, because I'm a psychobiologist and a social psychologist, I too have focused on individual, but also teams and small groups, and then thinking of it extrapolating out. However, when I'm thinking about what Bradley said, futurist, and where you might consider taking podcasts in your own work, probably read your book and other things, I think that I'm going to be hyperbolic. Monty and I are wrong if we believe to focus only on the individual and the small group. Based on what's happened, particularly in the United States, as well as elsewhere in the world, where I would like to see you and others take heart-centered approach is to the populations. We need a heart-centered culture. So I'm thinking about several things that Bradley said are really interesting, and I look forward to reading several of your books now. We too, have several books out. I have 3 out already. But what I'm concerned about is within academia, which although in academia people have tended to work longer, there is clearly ageism from our universities towards senior faculty member trying to bring down our resources and make room for others. And also I'm thinking within the heart-centered approach, it's one thing for individuals, but as I think about the data that Bradley beautifully summarized today, and a deep concern, we need to have at least a consideration of a heart-centered cultural approach. So, and this has struck me because I've recently I'm now on an outside doctoral dissertation committee for a political scientist. It's a young, incredibly bright international political scientist. And from that, she's given me, although I think in psychology, social psychology, I touch sociology, I don't usually think at the political science level, but we're finding our common themes of leadership, trust, democracy, other issues. But it's the culture that hasn't embraced this approach. So that's my encouragement where to go. It looks like MJ has something to add.
Yes, and I know we're running short on time, but what you said just really struck a chord. I was recently working with another NGO whose entire organization is incredibly passionate, and they're clear about their vision and their mission, but they have a new CEO and they wanted to reword their mission so that it creates internal and external resonance at a deeper level, because the verbiage was outdated. And I met with the new CEO and we were talking about, yes, you can facilitate different strategic, discovery meetings. But I said, here's an idea. What if you got the top executive leadership together and the top directors together, and instead of asking them their opinion, going back to what you were saying, Deb, you ask them, who do you see, not on your own team, but elsewhere in the organization, that has struck you as embodying the mission of the organization? And what if and whatever, from the janitor to to anybody that's out on the front lines, people that are coming to work and being missional regardless of their official title, and send them a personal note that says, hey, I see you, and you inspire me in these ways, that you embody the mission of, and I just want you to know that you are seen and what you do matters. And then the CEO follow up, have them give you the list of the people and mail them to their house, so they get it at their house. And then have the CEO meet with those people, invite those people who received the list to interview them, to say, tell me stories about how you embody, and do you know so she followed up and she said, we did it. And she teared up as she was talking about the experience. And she said, when they came to the meeting, one of these guys who'd been there forever he brought his card with him. And he said, I've worked here for 30 years or whatever. I've never gotten anything like this in my life. And so they talked to these front lines people who'd never had a leader role. They're courageous followers, in the organization. And they came up with verbiage that was so resonant when they